Happy Sunday, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. We're coming here to the end of week 3 for Aetherdrift, and every Sunday I like to do my best of 1 meta breakers. These are all decks that successfully were piloted to Mythic with at least a 60% win rate and at least 50 matches. And the reason why I started doing this was because there were some archetypes that were not covered in my best of 1, best of 3 meta review, and that were quite still fun, viable decks, right? And that's what I've mentioned before, and I'll mention again, is that Standard is in a really good place right now. I've played Standard when it was not in a really great place, where there was like one competitive option, and right now you have like 20 plus archetypes that are all viable to take to Mythic, if not more, right? That are all above a 50% win rate and doing quite well, right? And then, I think the best of 3 meta is okay too. Maybe that's not a popular opinion, but I've been reasonably happy with how things are going in Standard. So this week, though, I wanted to thank my new YouTube members, Vince Alm and Ethan Reyes. Thank you for joining as YouTube members. I appreciate the support. And I'm going to cover some, I think, 10 decks this week, none of which were covered in the best of 1, best of 3 meta review last Monday. So I'm trying my best to not have them overlap. Obviously, I don't know what will be in the top 8 tomorrow, so there might be some overlap there. But with that, let's get started. So this is Mono Black Midrange by Can of Chunky. I've followed Can of Chunky throughout the months. They're usually climbing up to Mythic, and they went 82 and 40 for a 67% win rate with a pretty standard list. So this one is more to just cover the bases of ones that didn't make the top 8 last week. Now, this one is not particularly well positioned against Azorius Omniscience, which is partly why I think it didn't make the top 8. There are some difficult matchups for Mono Black, but if you're just bumping up against a bunch of Mono Red, it does very well. So what we can see here compared to the standard list that we've covered in weeks past is that they're dropping the 2 Mishra's Foundries for the 2 Soulstone Sanctuaries. And I like this change. I think that, it has the obvious demon synergies with the Unholy Annex. I guess the con, if you will, to the Soulstone Sanctuary is that it's a little bit more expensive, which sometimes, like, using Liliana to have against other Liliana opponents in Mono Black, Mishra's Foundry might be slightly advantaged, but all in all, I think it's just kind of up to you which one you want to run. And hope you're all doing well with daylight savings. I'm exhausted. The spring forward is always a difficult one. So Esper Omniscience by Peso went 46 and 30 for a 61% win rate. And it's basically a Dimir shell playing white so that you can do the Abuelo's Awakening. And this is kind of like an alternative to the Azorius Omniscience, but trying to do the same thing. So you're trying to get Omniscience into your graveyard so that you can then play the Invasion of Arcavios to go into your sideboard and get this town ain't big enough, and then play another Invasion of Arcavios and just do some infinite loops. Now this one looks like it's doing the Season of Weaving into the Heroic Reinforcements to give everything haste. Cosmic Rebirth here too. Don't usually see some of these cards in the sideboard. We don't have the Beseech the Mirror in the... We don't have the Beseech the Mirror in the sideboard. We have the Beseech the Mirror in the main, which is okay, because Invasion of Arcavios can go grab the Beseech the Mirror from the main as well. And then you can use the Beseech the Mirror in the main to go find your Invasion of Arcavios. So like, there's some pros and cons to not having it in the sideboard, right? So we've still got the Philology Archaeologist. We've still got like 1 copy of the Afara's Dispersal, running the Stock Up, which we've seen this being kind of explored in Azorius Omniscience as well. I'm not a huge fan of it because it doesn't fill your graveyard, but it does give you pretty excellent card selection, right? And then the Bitter Triumph and Grim Bauble allows the deck to have some better removal rather than relying on the Soul Partition and just like bounce. So this is going to be a little bit better against the Mono Red matchup, which can be a struggle for this archetype to kind of slow their pace down, right? We've got Chart a Course so that you can discard the Omniscience if you have it in hand, And we've got a sweeper with the Terror Tide that is based off of how many cards are in your graveyard as well. So kind of a unique take on the Omniscience archetype, and I'm not convinced it's better than the Azorius one because you do have increased mana variance with the 3 colors, but it's definitely going to be better in some matchups like mono red. And I hope you guys have been enjoying the gameplay videos that I've been doing this week. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to keep up with that kind of pace, just because it depends on how busy of a week I'm having. But if you aren't familiar with the Azorius Omniscience deck, I did post a gameplay video just to kind of showcase how the deck works. So, next one here is Mardu Aggro by Korn. It was a 52 and 34 for a 60% win rate. And this is another one that I just wanted to kind of make sure everyone was aware of. We've talked about Mardu Aggro throughout the weeks. It's very similar to Boros Auras, just running the Callous Sellsword. And this version is dropping a Plains and a Mountain to bring in 2 of the Sunbillow Verges. Next up here is Rakdos Discard by Phoenix C64. And this is 109 and 76 for a 59% win rate, but was 62% before going into Mythic. So once they were in the Mythic, they dropped a little bit, but before their Mythic climb, they reached the criteria. Excuse me. So this archetype is a new one that's based off of the Monument to Endurance. We're seeing a lot of exploration with this card, trying to figure out how to really get it to shine. Talked a little bit about like the Is It Boom deck. We've seen Dimir archetypes that are centered around trying to get Monument to work, and this one's going with Rakdos. And so you've got cards like the Tunnel Grinder that allows you to discard. You can cycle Sky Crash. NT triggers a discard whenever you attack. And then you've got Mako, which can cycle as well, or you can just have it grow for each card that you're discarding, depending on if you grab it early or late in the game. Locust Spray can be used to slow down Mono Red's tempo or cycled as well. Bitter Triumph discards a card. Bloodghast is a really great card to discard because when you play a land, you get it back into the battlefield. We've got Scrapwork Mutt, which also triggers a discard. Withering Torment here is just for removal. Curious, so they have the Enchantment Hate as the pro to running this over like something like Go for the Throat. And then Fuel the Flames is a sweeper that, so like Pyroclasm, but also has the ability to cycle to trigger the Monument. And then because we're drawing a whole bunch of cards, 1 copy of Shieldred the Apocalypse. So kind of a cool one. Always fun to see innovation, and we're seeing a lot of innovation this week. Even though I did kind of start off with some of the decks that we've seen a lot before, we're going to be talking about a lot of new archetypes this week. Next up is Golgari Control by Malkel. Went 65 and 36 for a 64% win rate into Mythic. And so this one's so typically Golgari is more of a mid-range strategy, and this one is a little bit more of a control strategy. So really leaning on the sweepers of Deadly Cover-Up and Gix's Command. Then you've also got the kind of ramp of the Overlord of the Hauntwoods, which works with Up the Beanstalk, Spelunking as well. And then all of these 5-cost cards are also going to trigger your draw off of Up the Beanstalk. And you got Outrageous Robbery for playing your opponent's cards and outvaluing them that way. Duress for eliminating problematic cards in your control opponent's hand. Anoint with Affliction for removal. Same with Terror Asunder. And we've got the Lumbering World Wagon, which we saw explored in the Pro Tour. And in the top 8, there was one that was in Domain that was running a single copy. So I think we're going to see some exploration with the Lumbering World Wagon as well, because it just gives you a repeatable way of creating lands, sort of like the Overlord of the Hauntwoods. So we've got Case of the Locked Hothouse here, which is if you just have enough lands, then you can look at the top card and cast stuff from the top of your library. And we've got 1 copy of Valgavoth here, but I think we're looking to hard cast it because I don't see any way of playing it from the graveyard. There's no like graveyard reanimation for the Valgavoth, so it's just a hard casted Valgavoth on the top end. And then we also have 2 copies of Vivian Reed for a little artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying hate, and then also can be good for digging. Now we've got Azorius Affinity by Bajark. went 50 and 32 for a 61% win rate. And so I'm going to call this one, so the Azorius Artifacts build that has the Simulacrum's synthesizer, that one is also very artifact heavy, but we'll call this one the Azorius Affinity build. It's sort of like the Azorius Convoke build that had the Knight Errant of Eos, where you're trying to create a whole bunch of stuff to make a really big Regal Bunnycorn through like the Spyglass Siren, the Novice Inspector. You can then use those tokens to tap with the Warden of the Inner Sky, creating those tokens into creatures with the Zoetic Glyph. Schooners in here to boost up the power of your early flyers, and then Sheltered by Ghosts for the life gain, and then the Perilous Snare is one that we got in Aetherdrift that slots into this archetype nicely. It's not running the 1-drop, which the Nesting Bot, which is, I think, probably a decent fit in this archetype as well, just because it helps you get your speed started earlier. But using this just as an O-ring, an O-ring with upside, I think doesn't need to lean fully into the speed strategy. Memory Guardian also slots into this archetype really well, basically coming out as a 3/4 flyer for 1 blue because of the affinity for artifacts, and is what gives this deck its name. And then the Steel Seraph is in here so that you can give your flyers lifelink as a way to kind of help stabilize against like mono red. All right, and then we have Orzhov Ketramose, and J Money was during the community deck tech last week was suggesting a Ketramose build that was around the Azorius Oculus build, and I mentioned that more of what I'd seen Ketramose in was in Orzhov. And so this is similar to what I've seen before, taking a little bit of a different approach with like which cards are being run, like only running the 2 Ghost Vacuums instead of 4, running some more Legions to Ashes, that sort of thing, right? But anyway, this was Orzhov Ketramose by Yu Ya. Went 110 and 65 for a 63% win rate. And so like Cease and Desist allows you to exile cards from your opponent's graveyard or from your graveyard, and Ketramose is the build around. So whenever one or more cards are put into exile from graveyards and or the battlefield during your turn, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you are running the Ghost Vacuum, you don't want to do it during your opponent's turn if you want the trigger from Ketramose. And then it can't attack or block unless there are 7 or more cards in exile. So that counts your opponent's as well as yours. So Deadly Cover Up, being able to collect evidence, exiles cards from your graveyard as well as exiles cards from your opponent's hand. Temporary Lockdown exiles anything with mana value 2 or less. Legions to Ashes exiles all tokens that the player controls with the same name as the permanent that was exiled. Outrageous Robbery exiles top cards from your opponent's library. Anoint with Affliction exiles a creature with mana value 3 or less. Soul Partition exiles until your opponent can play it for 2 or more. So lay down arms exiles and they gain 3 life. So it's a whole bunch of exile cards built around Ketramose in a control shell. So the Orzhov control build. And, the cards like the Deadly Cover-Up, if you can remove their Omniscience in the graveyard, like just wins against that strategy. There's a lot of removal for the early like mono red. Where this deck I think is going to struggle is against something like Azorius Control, right? Where the harder counter spells might be difficult for this deck. But if you're coming up against a creature-centric strategy, I think that this deck looks pretty appealing and just completely hoses some strategies. And this one I thought was a unique approach. I like this one. So this is Boros Goblins by Burrito. So a lot of what we've been seeing with mono red goblins is mono red, and this one is deciding to bring in white. And there's 2 really good payoffs. I'm not convinced on the Raise of the Past, but I do like the War Leader's Call and the Sheltered by Ghosts, right? Because if you are doing the Cranko kind of loops where you're bringing in, we've seen Impact Tremors explored with the Cranko builds, right? And War Leader's Call allows you to have that Impact Tremors effect, but then also is an anthem that is giving you just increasing your general board state, and it's kind of playing like an additional lord, like we see with the Dropkick Bomber, right? So this one is running the 4 House Squad Heavies. It's running the 4 Draconautics Engineers. Now, my one critique for this list here is that with both of these really designed to give your Krenko haste, I think it's odd to only be running 2, especially because the rest, Raise the Past doesn't get your Krenkos back, right? So I think that, I'm not convinced on Raise the Past. I think the Krenko strategy is a little bit more appealing, but I do like bringing in the Sheltered by Ghosts because, as I mentioned before, this is a go wide strategy. There's a couple of different builds of mono red, one that's trying to be more aggressive, but it is still going to be slower than the Heartfire Hero, Manifold Mouse, Emberheart Challenger, Mouse Trifecta that we have in the Mice build of mono red, right? So I like the go wide build more because it is better against mono black, and the downside to that is that the go wide strategy is slower than the mono red strategy, and so Sheltered by Ghosts helps improve the matchup against mono red by giving you some life gain. The downside, I guess, with Sheltered by Ghosts is there isn't a huge target that just gets out of control with the there isn't an X or a star creature that just becomes super huge like it does in Boros Auras, so it's not as perfect a fit, but it's sort of like Celestia Rabbits maybe, but even there we have like the Burrow Guard that's a star, and we have the frog guy that the Valley Beast Caller or whatever it is, the one that gets really big, right? So more so the War Leader's Call. Maybe it's not actually worth the tension on the mana, but something, it's always worth to see the exploration. And so this was went 40. This is by Burrito, went 46 and 31 for a 60% win rate, and just thought it was worth talking about, right? All right, and now we're going to go back into some stuff that we've already talked about throughout the week. So Esper Self-Bounce is a strong tier 2 deck. It had its time where it was in the top 8, and then it has kind of fallen off. Once again, kind of depends on the matchups. This one doesn't have a really great way to interrupt the Azorius Omniscience lines. You can hold up something like Cut Down for their 1/1 and whatnot, but again, it has some tough matchups on the ladder. So this one was by Initial D, went 108 and 61 for a 64% win rate. And compared to the lists that so we see a couple of things. One, Storm Chaser's Talent is at 1 copy, and for best of 1, I agree with this. So typically in best of 3, you're going to see more copies of the Storm Chaser's Talent, but in best of 1, you're going to see less Kaido and less Storm Chaser's Talent because it's a more aggro meta, right? So I like that. There's a little bit of change to the lands in this build, and it's not running the Grim Bauble, and it is instead running the 2 copies of the Cut Down and the 2 copies of the Nowhere to Run. And that's fine. If you want to run these instead of the Grim Bauble, I think it's up to you. The upside to the Grim Bauble is that you have more, ability to replay it over and over. And for the large part, Grim Bauble is able to kill the same targets that Cut Down is killing, with the exception of Azorius Omniscience, right? You need the instant speed. So you can play the Nowhere to Run at instant speed, which kind of helps in that situation too. So I think the pro to running the Cut Down and the Nowhere to Runs is that it's better against the Azorius Omniscience, being able to zap the 1/1 and hopefully stop the combo. Other than that, though, it's kind of just the same strategy. You're doing a lot of bounce to get value off of your pixies, and playing a general enchantment strategy that then just overwhelms your opponent. All right, and the last one that I'd like to talk about this week is Rakdos Lizards by Black Flag Collectibles. Went 41 and 19 for a 68% win rate. And I guess actually I want to make one more mention too, which I'll save for last. So this is okay. So we've seen Rakdos Lizards for a while. Most of what I've seen being explored, right, was the inclusion of Alacia during Foundations. So usually I see this at 3 copies, and then we also see Hazaret, Godseeker, and then Far Fortune Inboss has been being explored from Aetherdrift. So this is a little bit of an older strategy that's not bringing in any of the those Aetherdrift cards specifically, it is bringing in the Gastral Thrill Seeker, which I think works really well in this archetype and is a common inclusion now going forward. What this deck is doing that's a little bit unique is going more into the Osier Exonal Deepest Might. And a couple of community deck techs ago, we were kind of talking about how we could try to get the Osier to work, bringing in things like the Magebane Lizard, trying to change all of your little pings in the deck to dealing the power of Osier Exonal. Definitely has some synergies, right? And then we've also got like go for the throats in here instead of lightning strikes. Little changes here and there that I don't think are hugely important. Running the full copy of the Gev and the Flame Cash Gecko. I think the more popular build has gone for 3 of these, but all in all, similar strategy. You're just trying to ping your opponent to death. And this is another one that's sort of like the Celestia Rabbits build, is also kind of a go wide strategy where a lot of the offspring lets you multiply enough that it can kind of be difficult for mono black to deal with. And then the dig off of oh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name. This one's not running the one that has the additional dig off of the top of your library, which is fine. Blanking on the name of that one, so I apologize. But yeah, you can just like roll out with this deck, and the Gastral Thrill Seeker works really well for this deck too. Just being able to ping for 1 on its ETB works really well with having dealt the damage. And then Alacia was a pretty a good inclusion for this deck as well, just because you being able to bring back your lizards that then ping on ETBs and things like that. So worth checking out with the Osier build. I really like how this one is set up. So I think I already mentioned, yeah, 41-19 for a 68% win rate. So really just well suited for their climb to Mythic. And last but not least, though, I did want to give a shout out. I meant to at the beginning of the video, and I just kind of spaced it. Donut Beast went 90-28 for a 76% win rate in Azorius Control. And I didn't include it because I covered Azorius Control last week in the Best of One meta review, and I just wanted to kind of, if you want to see a very good Azorius Control build, I highly recommend checking out Donut Beast on Twitch. I'm not sure where else they are. I know them from Twitch, but with the River Churn Monument, I think there's a really sweet Azorius Control build, and with a 76% win rate into Mythic, it is a very, very good deck. So I will probably include that one in the. Oh no, I want to include it in mine, but you know what? Go get it from him, right? Go find him, and if you can't find him, then maybe I'll talk about it later, or you can ask me, pretty please, can I have his list, and I'll send it to you specifically. But anyway, have a wonderful weekend. I will catch you all tomorrow for the Best of One, Best of 3 meta review. And the community deck list, so for your submissions will open up for the community deck tech this Tuesday. And then I will try my best to do a gameplay video later this week. So good luck with your matches and climbing the ladder. Good luck with your RCQs, and take care, everybody.